Hey, it's me. So today I want to talk to you about creative flow. Now, this is a subject I talk about a lot because I think it's really important as a creative person who teaches not only about creativity, but, what actually to make. It's on my mind a lot because I wonder, how does creativity work? How do other creative people tap into that? What is, the flow state? All these things are interesting to me. And I'm going to use an interesting example to illustrate a really interesting point that I'd like to make, and that is the importance of storytelling in your artwork and how storytelling is not only important to connect with the people who look at what you make, but it's important to connect with yourself to unlock creative flow. All right, so this is a copy. This isn't the original, but I want you to take a look at this for a minute. This is a picture that my 10-year-old grandson drew. All right, now here's the backstory. So we do video chats because he lives in a different place than me, so I can't see him all the time. So we'll do video chats, and we do various things as you would do with your grandson. But the other day, his dad suggested, why don't you guys do some clay together, whatever. But the clay was in an inaccessible place at the moment. So he said, well, let's draw. So he got out his pencil and pens and paper and all that, and we were drawing. And one of the things he enjoys is sort of adjacent play, like I'm doing my thing, he's doing his thing, but we're together, which is nice. I have learned to understand how important that is for some people, that they don't always want to play with you, they want to play beside you, which is cool. So a little something to think about, especially for kids like him that had some of those early kindergarten type years impacted greatly by COVID. Their ebb and flow with creativity and creative play might be a little bit different. I don't pretend to know about all that stuff well, but it's a thing worth exploring if you have a kid in that age group. But anyway, so we were starting to draw, and I'm going to talk to you about the story behind this because it's cute and it's fun and I wanted to share it. But also, I want you to kind of share with me how, as he unfolds what's happening, it creates the next thing that's happening. So first of all, we were sitting down and we're drawing and we're chatting about stuff, and he knows that I make money from selling artwork, and he was talking about, something in his job or whatever, and he goes, well, it's just really hard work to make any money from artwork. I said, it is, but it's also very fun. I said, do you remember that time when you drew that really cool picture of a cat? And my fan base, I showed it to them and asked if anybody wanted a copy, and quite a few people did, and you made some money. Do you remember that? And he was like, oh yeah. I said, you don't have to make artwork for money, but if you are wanting a little bit of extra spending money for Legos and whatnot, you are a very good artist. It's something to think about. So anyway, we talked about that a little bit. And then he asked me, and I thought this was important to share with you. He goes, okay, I would like to do that. What do you think your people want to buy? And I said, okay, stop. As an artist, when we get in our heads, what do we want to create based on what we think will sell? That's a problem, because sometimes then you start doing things that aren't fun. You should always create, if you can, what's fun for you, because there will be somebody who likes that if you're wanting to sell. So if you can do that, that's great. And we didn't discuss all the stuff that, there are some artists who do art as a job and they have to make not always something that they prefer. That's a whole nother topic of conversation. But for a little 10-year-old, if you're going to imagine having art as a possibility in your life, and especially something to make a couple of dollars off of over time, if that's something you prefer, doing what you enjoy is very important. Because otherwise you'll start disliking the artistic process, because I got to go draw more of those stupid things. Anyway, so he understood the best he could. I didn't over talk it because, you and I could over talk, but as a 10-year-old boy, not as much fun. But anyway, I said, you should draw what you like. I said, but if you're not sure what to draw, here's some thoughts. And I gave him a bunch of different things. I said, which one of those does any of those sound really fun to you? And he goes, I like to draw cats. I want to draw cats. because I knew a lot of my fan base really enjoyed cats. And this is the first thing he did. So I don't know if you can see, again, this is a copy. It's not great, but he drew in the middle of his page this lovely little happy white cat. Great. So I said, that's lovely. How do you feel about it? And he goes, I like it. I said, okay, great. That's good. The cat looks very happy. Why is he happy? And he looked at it for a minute, and then he drew this, a window with sun streaming down. And he goes, the cat is happy because it's in the sun and warm and having a nice nap. And I thought, oh, that's really nice. And then I could hear the light bulb just go ping, because he thought, okay, because he's got a couple cats at home, and he has 2 cats actually. And so it's like, if one of them is sitting in the sun, what's the other one doing? So immediately he just got too busy and started drawing stuff, and I'm like, ooh, I'm curious, what will he be drawing? And then he came up with just this little black cat, and you can see this black cat has a interesting expression, angry and sad, and he's waving his arms around. And I said, okay, what's going on? He goes, well, the other cat is a little bit upset because this cat has been sitting in the sun too long, and he wants a turn. And then he got busy again, and he drew this little pillow, and he goes, this other cat is waiting to have his turn in the sun with his pillow. And because he had the hands up, and I think he thought, well, why are the hands up? See, this is how story unfolds, right? So the hands were either up to bat the other cat, and he thought, well, no, I don't want that. I'm going to have him holding this little pillow. So then he drew this brown bit on the back of the cat. And I said, what's that? And he goes, the cat has been in the sun too long and it's starting to turn brown. I thought, well, that's unusual and different, but all right, that's pretty cool. So he had this whole thing going on, and I said, that's a really interesting scene. And then he goes, oh, okay. And he just started drawing in the floor and the rug just to make it more full and interesting, and which I thought was really nice. I thought, that's great. Well, I really like that. And then he, started doing it again, and he drew over here. Now, I don't know if you can see this, but he goes, and he says to me, this is very small. I'm not sure if you can see this, but there's a mouse. You can see the mouse, and there's some cheese up there. So while these cats are distracted, kind of having a conversation over who gets to be in the sun next, the little mouse is going to go up to this table, which of course has a little vase with flowers in it, because why wouldn't it, and get this cheese. Very stereotypical of what we're expecting of a domestic situation with mice and cats, but still very cool story. And then he started grinning to himself and drawing again, and then he showed me this. I said, what's that? He goes, that's an alien. I said, an alien? Okay, there's an alien in the house. He goes, yes, it's a very small alien. And then he drew one more time, and he added a little box of popcorn. He said the alien came because he wanted to watch the show of the cats tussling for space in the sun. So he's in the house with his popcorn watching the cat show. So that was the whole story as it unfolded, step at a time, while you were drawing. And I, of course, I said, Wellington, I'm really glad you shared with me your process here. This is so interesting. What a great story. Thank you very much. I'll make sure your dad scans in that photo for me so that if my people would like a picture, a copy of that with the story, I can share it with them. But the reason I'm sharing with you, as I said, is I found the whole process so fascinating because kids can tap into this very easily. And one of the interesting things that he said before we got started, and he has mentioned this before, is that when he's in school, oftentimes they have, a time for writing or drawing, and he struggles with that. As I think many kids do, because you're sort of put on the spot. It's sort of like you need to make something right now, come up with a clever story, make a good drawing. It's like, I don't know what to do. And you kind of freeze up because you feel this pressure to perform. And art is playtime. And again, no criticism of the teacher or the situation. Welly is his own kid, and he may understand or not understand the situation, different than what it actually is happening, because we all do that, right? We all have our own feelings. But I thought the feeling was interesting in that being felt like he had to create blocked him. And I don't know how many of you feel that sometimes. It's like you get together with people, or you're in a class, or you have some time off, and you should create, and suddenly everything freezes up because now it becomes like in the chore category, or in the If you don't do a good job, somehow you'll be in trouble or criticized or feel bad. Or, I mean, there's an awful lot of emotional weight that we put on so many things. But once him and I were just chatting, and I'm like, oh, you just do whatever you like, and we were talking, and I gave him a few suggestions. I kind of went through a very short list of like 4 different things that I knew he already liked that he might want to start drawing, and he went like, the cat sounds good. So I was a little bit helpful without being too much and without giving him too many parameters. I've learned over the years as a teacher that the best way to encourage people to open up and let their own creativity come out is to make it fun, take away any risk of embarrassment by feeling like you're making a mistake, and just keep it completely open to whatever that person feels like doing. Because sometimes we don't feel like it. Sometimes we're in a great creative mood. Sometimes we're not. It's all part of it. Don't even worry. But what was fun about that is when all of those restrictions were taken off and he could just play. There wasn't, if it turned out to be something that he could, have me offer to my group for sale and he could make a couple dollars, great. And if not, who cares? We're just having fun. And then, he did what he thought was good and he thought he was done, and then thought he had to think through the process. Like, well, why is this happening? Why is that cat there? What is it doing? And one thing led to another. And of course, as his creative brain got engaged in this, then there were mice and aliens and all kinds of other stuff happening, which I found so delightful, because that's how my brain works too, is I'm making something, and while I'm making it, I'm thinking, what's the story of this? And whatever it is the story evolves into will kind of dictate whether I add something or put another thing with it or whatever. And I find this to be one of the most joyful and rewarding aspects of being a professional creative, without a doubt. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I do in my creative life, and I love the variety of it. I love the challenge of it. I love the interaction. I love all of the different parts about it. And there are some things that are a bit of a chore, that are the business end of things, that you're doing marketing and advertising and, interacting and emails and taxes and all the stuff, that the business part of that. But the part I love the very most is my own delight and surprise at what story unfolds as I create, because I don't know where I'm going most of the time. And that is the fun. I read a quote, and it's making the rounds on the internet, so I'm sure you've probably seen it, and it's attributed to Oscar Wilde. I haven't vetted that to make sure, but it was interesting, and I feel like it is, because I think Stephen Fry was somebody who quoted it, and I think he vets his sources pretty reasonably. But he basically said, and I'm paraphrasing terribly, Oscar Wilde's words would have been much more interesting, but essentially is like, if you want to be a grocer or you want to be an accountant, then your punishment is that's what you'll be. But if you don't know what you want to be, then that is your reward. And I thought that's such a great way of putting it, and that applies to creativity so well too, is that when we kind of know where we're going, then that's where we'll be. And that's okay. But if you really want to have fun, just step out into the unknown and see where it takes you, and the story will take you. So trust the stories, tell the stories, enjoy the stories. Do not mind if your stories get weird. If your domestic bliss cat scene has a popcorn munching alien watching, then I think you've won. Happy creating.